Borsari, Strength Conditioning Intern at the University of Tennessee. I'm talking about food and addiction. We touched base a little bit on nutrition, on food habits, and how it eventually turned into a food addiction. So basically, for every physical activity, the body requires energy, and the amount depends on the duration and type of activity. Energy is measured in calories. It is obtained from the body or the food that we take in. Glycogen is the main source of fuel used by the muscles to enable you to undertake both aerobic and anaerobic activities. If you train with low glycogen levels, you will feel constantly tired. Training performance will be lowered, and you will be prone to injury or illness. Just real quick, talk about briefly proteins. Pretty much repair muscle. Fats are a source of energy. Carbohydrates is your main source of energy. Minerals, kind of those inorganic elements occurring in the body and which are crucial to its normal functions. Vitamins, water, and fat-soluble vitamins play important roles in many chemical processes in the body. Water is essential to body function, acts as a vehicle for carrying out nutrients. 60% of the human body is water. Roughage, which is also known as fibers. The fibers portion of your diet, essential to the health and the digestive system. Fuel intake, this is kind of the breakdown of the fuel of what you should be taking in. 50% of your diet should come from carbohydrates, 30% of fats, and 13% of proteins. I gave a little example. This is for someone, I'm about 210, 215 pounds. If I were to work out for an hour a day, this is the calories that I should be taking in, the amount of grams in carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. I'm not going to go in after most of it, the previous presentations, but the carbohydrates, I think most of us have a pretty good understanding of. So I think most of us have a pretty good understanding of carbohydrates as a whole.
I had a good understanding of biometrics, but I got that shit done.
Fats as well. You can go to the next slide, please. And proteins. Now let's get into the factors that affect eating habits. The first one's we're going to talk about family, economics, culture, society, and advertising. The first one is family factors or habits. Okay, depending on what your family upbringing is, depending if you're coming from a large family, if you're coming from a single-parent family, if you're coming from a foster home, is really going to depend on what food you take in at a young age. So if you're you come from a large family that likes to sit down at 5 o'clock every night and have a nice, well-balanced meal, or if you come from a single-parent family, maybe your mother or father is working nights and you have to come home and you have to pretty much put the food on the table for yourself. So now you're learning these habits at a very young age, and it's really out of your control. You can't decide what you get to put on the table always at a young age. Next is going to be economics, and the major factor is pretty much just money, is affordability. Can I afford to have some of these more expensive meals, or do I have to kind of go and kind of get what I can afford at the time? And again, at a young age, that's not really something that's in your control. So these things are part of what you're taking in at a young age. Culture, a lot of things that we do can be based upon your culture. Certain cultures prohibit you to eat certain foods. Certain cultures want you to fast during certain periods. Certain cultures want you to eat certain things in certain periods. So if your culture is a big part of your life, then that's also going to determine what you are putting into your body. Society that you live in, if you're from a real large city and you're always on the go, you're working late hours, whatever's around you, maybe you have to pick up fast food because you're working until 10 o'clock at night, so you swing by the local drive-thru and grab something to eat. If you're brought up in more of a rural environment, maybe you live on the farm, you pretty much eat what is around you. You grow what you eat, or you're from something in between there where you're used to like mom and pop stores that you get stuff that's grown in the area, or something along those lines. Is really going to determine what you're putting into your body. And lastly, this is kind of more of a newer one, is advertising. Advertising is a big thing now with all these Can you go to the next slide, please? It's more like they're starting to put all these fad diets out there now, saying high protein, low carb, the grapefruit diet, the Atkins diet. All these diets and advertising, they're trying to market these new things that might give you temporary weight loss, but is not going to last. It's not going to keep that weight off you for a long time, because it's shocking your body more than it is a long period of time throughout keeping that body weight off of you. So these are the new studies they're trying to tie this into the addictive process. So they say that's an evolutionary, biological, and behavioral. Okay, the first one is evolutionary. And our bodies are programmed to find food because we need food to survive. The pathways in our brains to find the food to survive are the same pathways that are hijacked by the drugs and alcohol that people are addicted to. The brain is stimulated and motivated to find what you need to survive. And in American society, we've taken this to the next level. Pretty much, we have taken corn, which is a naturally high sugar vegetable, and we developed corn syrup, which is now even more sweet, and it starts to become a little more addictive. Once we got to the corn syrup, that still wasn't good enough for us, so we started making Twinkies, brownies, cookies, donuts, all this other stuff that was adding food additives and adding more sweetness, which is now making it even more addictive. Still wasn't good enough for the American society, so we added caffeine to it. So now you're adding another stimulant to this product, which is even making it more addictive. So compulsive to make things better and more rewarding. That's the way the American society is starting to make things, and that's how it's evolutionizing the foods and making it more addictive for people. And one of the example in a lot of the articles that I've read, they talk about, they always go back to drug and alcohol. And the previous example, this is the example they used for the drugs. The cocoa leaf, it's used in Latin America, much like we drink coffee, it's a stimulant. But that wasn't good enough for them, so they had to develop cocaine, which gave them a little more stimulant. And that still wasn't good enough, so they developed crack cocaine, which was even giving them a more stimulant. So it's just another way to relate to the food, and they always go back to the drug and alcohol comparison. The biological evidence. Disrupted brain regions. A lot of the dopamine is released when a certain food that one is addicted to is seen. Anticipation reward is very strong. The consumer reward is very low. So basically what's that saying? The example of an alcoholic. If an alcoholic, they gave pictures and diagrams in the book where they took they looked at the brain and they were flashing pictures. So they showed a picture of a tree. Brain wasn't stimulated. Showed a picture of a car. Wasn't stimulated. Showed a picture of a beer bottle. The brain began to get stimulated and release dopamine. And they wanted that beer. They didn't know why they wanted it, but they just wanted to drink the beer, is what it came down to. Once they received the beer and drank it, the stimulation was now gone. The stimulation was gone. So, I'll get to that after. Go now. Behavioral evidence.
That last sentence, Larson.
Huh?
Go back to the last one. You need to read the last sentence. You got it?
Yeah.
All right.
Behavioral evidence. An individual is told they cannot have something they want it. It will make them want it more, especially if it's something they are addicted to. So the behavioral thing, if you're saying that they cannot have it, they're going to want it even more. And if you're pushing them away from it, they're going to want it even more. And once they do stop, they may stop for a short period of time, but when they break, it's going to turn into a binge situation, where if you constantly push them away from what they want, eventually they're going to get it, and eventually they're going to overindulge in it, and that's just going to turn right back into the addiction process of eating and taking in all those bad things. So this is the criteria for substance dependence. This is the outline that they use for drug and alcohol addictions. It's the same thing, and they talk about the tolerance, the withdrawal, the more substance taken in than intended, the persistent desire or effort to cut down, great deal of time spent occurring, using or recovering from the effects of substance, important activities given up because of use, continued use despite persistent problems. Addiction is possible. With the factors that determine what we eat and the new evidence that speaks about human beings evolving certain foods to make them addicting, the way our brain responds and how we behave shows a strong connection with foods being addictive. How do we change these poor eating habits and addictions? The most effective way is pretty much the same diagram that like I said, they use for people that have a drug addiction or alcohol addiction. Is pretty much you can't push them away from what they want. So you have to kind of wean them off of it. So instead of saying, all right, you can't, someone, for example, that might be addicted to fast food, you can't say that they've been brought up with that their whole life. You can't say, all right, your fast food is now out of your diet. It's just not the way it's going to work. You have to, if they're used to eating it 7 times a week, all right, let's cut it down to 3. Have it 3 times a week, kind of space it out. That'll fulfill their need for a little while. All right, now let's try to cut it down to one day a week. And you try to eventually just wean them off of it, because you can't just cut them cold turkey, because they're not going to, it's not, their body won't respond, and that's not how they're mentally going to respond to it. You need to try to educate them as much as possible, because the way that a lot of people are brought up, it's a comfort zone for them. They know what they've been eating their whole life, so they're going to always fall back to that. They don't want to break. They don't want to break from that. They want to stay right there. They don't really want to explore other options. You need to educate them on what's better to put in their body and how that could benefit them both on the field and just in their everyday health. And also, it's something that they need to want to do themselves. It's not something that you can force upon them. So the more you just try to hint towards it and try to steer them in that direction, the more effective it's going to be. Because they'll put up a wall as soon as you start talking about you can't eat this, you can't drink that, don't do this, don't do that. It's not going to happen. So it has to be, you kind of have to ease into that process of letting them almost make the decision of not eating those foods or not doing that. And it's pretty much, it comes down to knowing your athlete, where they've been, what they've been eating, just kind of get to know where they're at with their whole upbringing and their eating habits previously to where they're at now, and see how you can help them better and better their eating habits at this level now. So, last one's just notes. We can go next. That's just notes. That was just notes for myself. So.